You know, I got to admit, I don't know what is in the deal, but I do know this. When these guys are dancing in the streets over it, and Europe scrambling to lift sanctions because of it, maybe, just maybe, it's time to worry about it. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto at Good Friday, or more like Good Grief, because maybe it's just me. But when this guy is smiling, I'm worrying. And Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer says I'm not alone. I got to tell you, Tony, I mean, it's just weird, especially when we get different vibes from different sides about what's in presumably the same deal.
Right.
Something is seriously amiss here. What do you think?
Well, look, Neil, I would have felt a lot more comfortable, as I'm sure you would have, if it was a joint statement issued that both the Iranians and U.S. signed off on. The fact sheet, I've went through this thing in painful detail, and I try to go back and see where the Iranians are saying the same thing we are. I don't see it. So I'm very worried about the perceptions here. And clearly, like you said, the Iranians are dancing in the street because their perception is all the different sanctions that in place go away instantly. And I don't think it's what President Obama said yesterday. So I think there's some major disconnects here that we're going to be hearing about more over the next 2 months, 3 months.
What worries me about those sanctions going away, or the bulk of them, certainly all the European ones, is that we have until June 30th to cobble together the actual rest of the deal beyond the framework.
That's right.
So we're already taking away the punishment before the punished. It's weird.
Well, the part of it, Neil, is I'm just not sure that the fact sheet they lay out, they talk about the Iranians giving up a lot of their uranium, like going from 10,000 kilograms to 300. They talk about snap inspections by IAEA, which is great, by the way, if it's enforceable. But my concern is there's no real off-ramp from the basically cooperation. If they don't cooperate, I think we have real problems. The other thing, I got to be honest with you here, is the complexity. The president said this is a complex deal. No doubt. This is so complex, Neil, that I think they can hide in plain sight building a bomb before us. And let me say one other thing real quick that I'm very concerned about, and I think you ought to be too, and the public ought to be. There's no discussion of ballistic missiles here. One of the key things in every other negotiation we've always done is had the ballistic missiles on the table. START, INF, all that was on the table. We don't see that here.
You know obviously a lot more about this than I do. I just go by signs and vibes. And the signs and vibes worry me to all the points I mentioned with the Iranians celebrating, and we're not. Right. Maybe we're just more low-key and poker face than that, but I'll give the benefit of the doubt. But when the French, I heard late today, are starting to lecture on not being tough enough, and that the French are among those happy to give up sanctions, I'm beginning to think it's a bad Abbott and Costello movie, and that they don't know. No one knows who's on first.
Well, that's a problem. Again, I've read everything I can on this, and I'm still baffled. And I don't know what to say other than I'd like to believe what the president said is correct. I have a strong feeling it's not, because, again, everybody else out there is saying something different. So, again, the best thing they could have done, Neil, both sides should have had one document that both the Iranians and the P5+1 signed up to. We don't have that. The only thing I can say is we have chaos, and until Congress gets back, I think that, they need to start asking hard questions as well.
Sanctions are going away without Congress weighing in. In fact, Congress might not weigh in at all.
Well, I think Congress will. I'd like to believe that they're going to get back and start going to work. I've been asked to comment by several staff members. I'm on the Hill Tuesday trying to give background to folks. So I don't think it's over yet, and I don't think it's going to get any easier to understand. I really don't.
All right. Well, I'll try to give the benefit of the doubt. Hope springs eternal that we've cobbled together something here that's going to make sense, but I don't know.
We hope so.
The vibes are not good. Colonel, thank you very, very much.
Hey. Thank you, Neil.
A lot of people really continue to say that Iran simply can't be trusted. You hear that all the time. But at least this guy has good ground here. He knows firsthand. Because during the Iranian hostage crisis, any sign of progress was usually followed by a delay. And any overture on the part of Iran was followed by a quick slap. And in the end, Rocky Sickman was held captive for 444 days. He joins us right now. Rocky, who better than someone like you to know whether you could trust the Iranians? Now, people could go back and say, well, that was, 35 years ago, 34 years ago. It's different. What do you say?
Neil, it was really 36 years ago. 36 years ago, November 4th, 1979, Iran, the country of Iran, took 52 American hostages for 444 days. They raped us of our freedom, our dignity, and our pride, and they've never been held accountable. And they lied to us every day for those 444 days. And after that, Iran then killed 240 Marines in Beirut. They then built IEDs. They continue to teach. Neil, a Muslim is not born with hatred. They're taught hatred. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, you heard them chanting "Death to America." You hear them talk about eliminating Israel. It is very concerning because, you know, those 444 days, I mean, it was mock firing squads, Russian roulette, and, you know, it's very concerning. And so between now and the end of June, we have a chance to make sure that Iran has been held accountable for what they did and send a message to the rest of the world. If you screw with us, we're going to come after you and we're going to make you pay. And so I wasn't at the negotiating table, but I'm hoping that's what's going to happen, Neil.
You know, Rock, I was thinking of the 35 years I was referring to as the time that you were released in the opening hours of the Reagan administration. And it was Ronald Reagan who had said at the time that he would be a very different negotiator and that he would be a lot tougher. And then, you know, voila, you're all freed. And I'm wondering if that's kind of the message you're sending here, that there is a point at which there is no return unless you get back to just trust, verify, but be very, very tough about it.
Yeah, and again, the reasons why we've not had relationships with Iran was because of the hostage crisis, November 4th. And they told us during all of our interrogations, Neil, it is not you, the American people, we hate, it is your government. But we will use you to humiliate your government. And they've
and by
done
the way,
that
government
for
under
36
Democratic
years.
or Republican administrations, to your point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the radical Muslims, they're not Democrat and they're not Republican. They're out to humiliate our government, and they've done it for 36 years. I'm hoping, I'm praying that, you know, President Obama and Kerry, they both have skin in the game. They have families. They don't want a nuclear war. And so we want this to be done. But again, unless you hold Iran accountable and you make them start changing their mentality and their teaching to the young Muslims, and we wonder why people run around the world and they explode bombs in schools and churches and airports. Well, they've been taught that, and something's got to change, and now's the time to make sure that Iran does do that.
You know, the administration has been arguing, you got to make the overture, you got to make the effort, you got to talk before you give up all else and all but go to war. So they are, give this time. Let's see what happens. There's a lot we don't know about the deal. I was referring with a prior guest about all the noise here that doesn't look promising. In fact, the Iranians celebrating and all the conditions going away and the sanctions going away without anyone even going into the details. That's what troubles me, that we might have been taken advantage of.
It's not the first time. You know, I mean, look at the past 36 years. Again, they have stretched every president. They seem to be wanting to negotiate, and right before that president gets out of office, they stab him in the back and the next one comes. I'm hoping this is not the case. And again, as I'm hearing, there's not a real written agreement. Nothing's really set in stone yet. But again, between now and June, we've got the opportunity to really put it in writing. And again, make sure that Iran is held accountable and that they put some effort into changing that mentality in that country and around the world so that we can. And negotiation's good. There are people that want freedom in that country. And I think that's where a lot of the young, they see what is outside that country and they want it in there. And so hopefully now is the time. But Iran must be held accountable for what they did to 52 American hostages when they took us for 444 days.
Incredible. I remember that like it was yesterday. I'm sure you do as well. Rocky Sinkman, thank you very, very much. You don't hear that perspective a lot from someone who is knee-deep in it. Take a look at this.
Thanks.
The cabinet is united in strongly opposing the proposed deal. This deal would pose a grave danger to the region and to the world and would threaten the very survival of the State of Israel.
Well, Bibi's telling Barack that this bites. To Fox News chief Washington correspondent James Rosen on whether the White House is biting back. James.
Neil, good afternoon. At this point, it's not just the disapproval of the Israelis and our Persian Gulf allies that the Obama administration must now confront, but also the elation, at least on the surface of things, that the Iranians are projecting over the proposed terms. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif received an enthusiastic welcome back to Iranian soil. The Iranians have made starkly different claims from the U.S. about what the terms provide, most notably as to whether economic sanctions will be lifted gradually or immediately. Such divergent interpretations are possible in part because the parties released separate documents in different languages describing what was agreed to. Secretary of State Kerry arrived back at Joint Base Andrews at around 6 this morning, having spent most of the month of March negotiating with the Iranians in Switzerland. Kerry told reporters yesterday flatly that there is no sunset to the parameters outlined, quote, none. And yet the Secretary himself went on to note that some limitations on Iran's enrichment and R&D activities will last 10 years, other provisions 15, still others 25, and still others in perpetuity. And I asked Kerry's spokesperson if those aren't precisely sunset clauses.
The deal overall, as people have reported over the last few weeks before they knew the details of it, is not a sunsetted deal. There are provisions that will be in place for certain periods of time. That is true. There are different phases in this. There's a 10-year, a 15-year, a 25-year. Again, I think some people who just said this would be 10 years might be a little surprised at what we announced yesterday.
So much of the fine print, the highly precise technical details of these proposed terms still remain to be negotiated until June 30th, and Marie Harf told us just a short while ago that the R&D issues, what kinds of centrifuges Iran can start building and when, are among the most challenging of those details to be